What if I told you that you never have to feel angry or bothered by anyone ever again? Imagine going through your day completely unaffected by rudeness, insults, or unfair treatment. Sounds impossible, right? But the Stoics mastered this skill thousands of years ago, and their wisdom is more relevant today than ever. In a world filled with negativity, difficult people, and constant distractions, Stoicism offers a way to stay calm, composed, and in control. It teaches us that we don't have to be prisoners of our emotions or react impulsively to every challenge. Instead, we can develop a mindset so unshakable that nothing can disturb our inner peace. In this video, I'll break down 8 powerful Stoic principles that will help you master your emotions and stop letting people get under your skin. By the end, you'll have a completely new way of looking at the world, one that puts you in control, no matter what happens. Let's begin. Number 1. Understand that you control your reactions, not others. There was a time when I used to get irritated by the smallest things. An inconsiderate driver cutting me off, a coworker taking credit for my work, or a rude comment from a stranger. Each of these moments felt like a personal attack, something meant to disrupt my day and make me miserable. But the truth is, none of these events had any power over me until I allowed them to. Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them." This means that frustration, anger, and irritation are not caused by the things happening around us, but by the meaning we attach to them. If someone insults me, I have a choice. I can take it personally, letting it ruin my mood, or I can see it for what it is, just words from another person who may be acting out of their own ignorance or frustration. Modern life throws countless opportunities at us to get upset. Social media alone is a minefield of arguments, negativity, and opinions designed to provoke a reaction. But what if we trained ourselves not to react, not to give away our peace so easily? Imagine seeing an insulting comment and simply moving on. Imagine someone yelling at you in traffic, and instead of engaging, you calmly drive away, knowing their anger is their problem, not yours. I started practicing this with small things. When someone interrupted me, instead of feeling disrespected, I reminded myself that their action wasn't about me. When I got an email that normally would have made me furious, I paused and asked, "What am I making this mean?" More often than not, I realized I was creating unnecessary suffering by interpreting events in a negative way. The more I practiced, the more I saw that emotional control is a skill, just like physical strength. The stronger it gets, the harder it becomes for people to push me off balance. Life will always be unpredictable, and people will always behave in frustrating ways. But true freedom comes when you understand that nothing outside of you has the power to make you angry. Only your own judgments can do that. And once you master those, you master yourself. Number 2, expect people to be flawed and accept it. Every morning I remind myself that today I will encounter difficult people. Someone will be rude, someone will be inconsiderate, someone will be selfish. It's not pessimism, it's preparation. Marcus Aurelius advised, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. None of them can hurt me." He wasn't being cynical. He was training himself to expect the reality of human nature so he wouldn't be caught off guard. In the past, I used to hold on to an unrealistic expectation that people should be kind, considerate, and reasonable. And every time someone wasn't, I took it as a personal offense. But why should I expect perfection from others when I myself am not perfect? How many times have I been short-tempered, forgetful, or self-centered without realizing it? I remember a time when a friend completely ignored my messages for days. I felt disrespected. I told myself they didn't value our friendship, and I started to feel resentment. But when we finally spoke, I found out they were going through something difficult and weren't in the right mental space to talk. That moment taught me that I had wasted energy being angry over an assumption. I had expected perfection from someone who was just as human as I was. In modern life, we encounter this everywhere: bad customer service, inconsiderate drivers, co-workers who don't pull their weight. If we expect the world to be fair, we'll be constantly disappointed. But if we go into each day knowing that people will act selfishly at times, we won't be surprised when it happens. More importantly, we won't waste energy being angry about it. The biggest shift for me was realizing that difficult people are my teachers. They give me an opportunity to practice patience, to master my emotions, and to apply the Stoic mindset in real time. Every annoying person is a test, and every test is a chance to get stronger. If someone is rude, I see it as an opportunity to remain calm. If someone is selfish, I remind myself that expecting them to be different is unrealistic. When you truly accept that people will be flawed, their behavior stops bothering you. You stop taking things personally. You become unshakable. And the best part? You become the kind of person others admire, calm, composed, and completely in control of your emotions. Number 3, detach from insults and opinions. There was a time when a single negative comment could ruin my entire day. If someone criticized my work, my appearance, or even my opinions, I would replay their words over and over, feeling the sting of their judgment long after they had moved on. It wasn't until I embraced Stoicism that I realized how much power I was giving to other people. Power that never truly belonged to them in the first place. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." This completely shifted the way I viewed criticism. If someone's words contain truth, then I should welcome them as a chance to improve. If they didn't, then why should I be upset? Either way, there was no reason to take it personally. We live in an age where opinions are everywhere. Social media has made it easier than ever for people to voice their thoughts, often without kindness or consideration. The internet is filled with people ready to criticize, argue, or belittle others. If you take everything personally, you'll spend your entire life in a state of emotional distress, constantly seeking validation and avoiding criticism. But once you recognize that other people's opinions are just that, opinions, you free yourself from their control. I once received harsh feedback on something I had worked hard on. My first instinct was to get defensive, but then I paused and asked myself, is this feedback useful? Instead of reacting emotionally, I evaluated it logically. Some of it was valid, so I used it to improve. The rest was just someone's subjective perspective, and I let it go. What once would have ruined my mood became a tool for growth. The reality is, most people's opinions of you are a reflection of them, not you. When someone insults you, it's often their own insecurity, bias, or frustration coming through. If you internalize their words, you're carrying their burden instead of letting them deal with it themselves. The moment you stop taking insults personally, you gain a level of freedom that few people ever achieve. You become immune to the negativity of others because you no longer give their words the ability to harm you. Number 4, recognize that anger is self-inflicted. I used to believe that other people made me angry. If someone disrespected me, I felt justified in my outrage. If someone was rude, I saw it as my right to be offended. But Stoicism taught me a lesson that completely transformed my mindset. No one makes you angry. You allow yourself to be angry. Epictetus put it best. Another person will not hurt you without your cooperation. You are hurt the moment you believe yourself to be. This means that anger isn't caused by what happens to us, but by the way we interpret what happens to us. The event itself is neutral. Our emotions are what give it meaning. Think about how differently people react to the same situation. One person gets cut off in traffic and explodes in rage, honking and yelling. Another person shrugs and continues driving as if nothing happened. The event was the same, but the reactions were completely different. Why? Because the first person believed that being cut off was an offense worthy of anger, while the second person saw it as a minor inconvenience. Once I internalized this, my entire outlook on anger changed. I realized that every time I got upset, I was choosing to let something external disturb my inner peace. And if I had the power to let it in, I had the power to keep it out. Now, when I feel anger rising, I pause and ask myself, is this worth my energy? Most of the time, the answer is no. I remind myself that my emotions are within my control and that no one can dictate how I feel unless I allow them to. Instead of reacting impulsively, I take a breath, step back, and respond from a place of calm. The result? A life with significantly less stress and frustration. Anger no longer controls me. I control it. And in doing so, I've gained a sense of power that most people never realize they have. Number 5, view offenses as opportunities for virtue. It's easy to want revenge when someone wrongs us. Whether it's a betrayal, an insult, or an act of disrespect, the instinctive response is to retaliate, to make the other person feel the same pain they caused us. But Marcus Aurelius offered a different perspective. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Instead of seeking revenge, what if we saw every offense as an opportunity to strengthen our character? What if, instead of mirroring the negativity of others, we used their actions as a test of our own virtue? I once had a colleague who constantly undermined me at work. They would take credit for my ideas, speak over me in meetings, and try to make me look bad. My initial reaction was anger. I wanted to put them in their place, to expose their behavior. But then I asked myself, what would a Stoic do? The answer was clear: remain composed, act with integrity, and let their actions be their own downfall. I focused on doing my work well, treating others with respect, and refusing to engage in petty behavior. Eventually, their reputation suffered because people saw them for who they were, while I remained unshaken. This approach applies to all areas of life. When someone insults you, don't insult them back. Show restraint. When someone treats you unfairly, don't stoop to their level. Rise above it. Every difficult person is an opportunity for you to practice patience, wisdom, and self-control. There's nothing more powerful than responding to negativity with unwavering composure. When you refuse to let others pull you into their chaos, you show them, and yourself, that you are in complete control. You become untouchable, not because people don't try to harm you, but because their actions no longer have any effect. And that is the ultimate victory. Number 6, let go of what you can't control. There was a time when I obsessed over things I had no power to change. If plans got canceled, I felt frustrated. If someone treated me unfairly, I replayed the situation in my head, imagining different outcomes. If world events seemed chaotic, I let them disturb my peace. But the more I studied Stoicism, the more I realized how much of my suffering came from trying to control the uncontrollable. Epictetus put it simply, some things are up to us and some are not. This is one of the most important Stoic lessons. If something is outside your control, it is foolish to waste energy on it. If something is within your control, then take action instead of complaining. Most people live in a state of anxiety and frustration because they don't follow this principle. They worry about what others think of them. They stress over things that might happen but haven't yet. They argue over opinions they will never change. But none of these things are within their power. The only thing they can truly control is their own mind and actions. When I embraced this, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I stopped trying to control other people's opinions and instead focused on living in a way that aligned with my values. I stopped stressing about things that might go wrong and instead focused on preparing myself to handle whatever came my way. When something didn't go as planned, I reminded myself, was this ever really in my control? If the answer was no, I let it go. This mindset doesn't mean becoming passive. It means directing your energy where it actually matters. You can't control whether a storm cancels your flight, but you can control how you respond. You can't control whether someone is rude to you, but you can control whether you let it ruin your day. The more you practice this, the more unshakable you become. Life still throws its challenges at you, but you no longer suffer from the illusion that you can control everything. You accept reality as it is, and in doing so, you gain true peace. Number 7, don't take things personally. I used to take everything personally. A friend canceling plans felt like rejection. A colleague's blunt feedback felt like an attack. Even a stranger's bad mood could make me wonder if I had done something wrong. But as I studied Stoicism, I realized how much unnecessary suffering I was creating for myself. Epictetus offers a powerful reminder. If a person gave your body to a passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who insults you, leaving it disturbed and troubled. Have you no shame? In other words, why do we let other people's words and actions have so much control over our emotions? The truth is, most of the time, people's behavior has nothing to do with us. If someone is rude, it's likely because they're having a bad day, not because of anything we did. If someone is critical, it's often a reflection of their own insecurities. If someone ignores us, they may be distracted by their own struggles. But instead of seeing these situations for what they are, we personalize them, making them about us when they rarely are. Once I embraced this, my entire perspective changed. Instead of assuming the worst, I started giving people the benefit of the doubt. When someone was short with me, I reminded myself that they might be dealing with something difficult. When someone criticized me, I filtered out what was useful and ignored the rest. When someone didn't respond the way I expected, I stopped making assumptions. The best part? The more I stopped taking things personally, the less power people had over my emotions. Their negativity no longer affected me. Their opinions no longer dictated my self-worth. I became free in a way I had never experienced before. And in that freedom, I found a deep sense of confidence and peace. Number 8. Practice negative visualization. Most people try to avoid thinking about negative outcomes. They convince themselves that if they don't think about bad things happening, they won't. But the Stoics believed the opposite. By actively imagining difficulties, you become mentally prepared to handle them. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" This practice, known as premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils, is one of the most powerful Stoic tools. Instead of blindly hoping for a smooth day, you mentally prepare yourself for challenges. And when those challenges arise, you aren't caught off guard. You are ready. I started doing this every morning. Before I stepped out the door, I told myself, "Today, something will go wrong. Someone will be rude. Something will be frustrating." But instead of fearing it, I prepared for it. When difficulties happened, I didn't react with shock or anger. I had already accepted them. This practice also applies to life's bigger challenges. When I was working on a major project, I imagined all the ways it could go wrong. Delays, mistakes, criticism. Instead of stressing over the unknown, I mentally walked through each possibility and how I would respond. By the time the real challenges arrived, I felt like I had already lived through them. They had no power over me. The modern world encourages avoidance. Don't think about failure, don't think about loss, don't think about setbacks. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. When you actively prepare for hardships, they lose their ability to shake you. You become resilient, unbreakable, and fearless. You no longer live in constant anxiety about what might happen because you've already made peace with every possible outcome. This is the true strength of the Stoic mindset. You no longer fear difficulties. You welcome them as opportunities to grow. You no longer hope for an easy life. You train for a strong one. And when life inevitably tests you, you meet it with the calm confidence of someone who has already seen it all before. The world is unpredictable. People will be rude. Situations will be unfair. Challenges will come. But none of these things have to control you. When you apply Stoic wisdom, you stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming the master of your own mind. We've covered 8 timeless lessons from the Stoics that can help you stay calm, composed, and completely unbothered by others. Whether it's detaching from insults, letting go of what you can't control, or practicing negative visualization. Every principle is a tool to build mental resilience. Now, the question is, will you put these into practice? True strength isn't just about knowing these ideas, it's about living them. So next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: their actions don't have power over you unless you give it to them. If you found this video helpful, please like and share it to spread the wisdom of Stoic philosophy. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss future videos on Stoic living and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and I wish you strength on your journey.